The conflict between Israel and Iran continues to unfold even as we speak. Updates from the IDF show that Iran is unleashing more attacks in retaliation for last night's targeted strikes by Israel. And so we want to get the latest on those attacks, but also how the U.S. is responding to these attacks and what impact might they have on talks between the U.S. and Iran, which were scheduled at least to take place this Sunday. So here to discuss this and more is Dr. A.J. Nolte. As I said a while ago, he is the director of the Institute for Israel Studies at Regent University. And absolutely, in fact, he's coming live to us from Jerusalem right now. Absolutely a scholar on this. Dr. Nolte, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to have you.
Great to be here, Jody. And as they say over here, Shabbat Shalom. It's right just past midnight here in the old city of Jerusalem, and I'm glad to be with you.
Well, thank you so much for staying up. I know there's a lot going on. First of all, we pray for you and the others in Jerusalem and Israel and this whole thing, and just pray safety on you and the entire nation. Let's begin with your take on last night's strikes by Israel. It's a pretty fascinating military maneuver that they pulled off.
Yeah. Sometimes it's evident when you see something like this that it's been planned for a while. The fact that Israel was able to go in, hit Natanz, which was the major nuclear site that they hit as hard as they did, hit other sites around Tehran, and now we're getting confirmations of some of the major military figures they took out. I've heard reports that the Air Force strike was matched with, let's just say, considerable Israeli intelligence assets on the ground that were deployed very effectively. And so I think Israel has had the infrastructure in place for this for quite a while, the planning, all of that kind of stuff. And they were looking for a specific trigger. And I think a confluence of factors led them to decide this was the time when they had the opportunity to act and when also they had to act.
Yes, and even as we speak, Israel's in the process of intercepting Iranian missiles with the help of the U.S., I might add. And of course, Iran also had a drone attack earlier, as we all know. Yeah. But Israel is saying that Iran has crossed the red line because they're now seemingly targeting civilian centers. I mean, it really, Dr. Nolte, could the contrast be any more clear than it? I mean, you've got Israel, which is fighting to defend life and defend itself, while Iran and its proxies are fighting to kill.
Yeah, I can confirm. We were at dinner with friends. They had lifted Home Front Command here had lifted the shelter in place, and so we actually had been on tour for a while. And we needed to do laundry, and some friends offered us to get dinner and come over for laundry. And then we actually saw people saw, and I could hear from where we were the missiles coming in and the interceptors going. I can confirm. I don't want to talk too much about locations because the IDF is wanting to keep that close held because they don't want Iran to know what was successful and what was not. But I can confirm that at least some of the areas were very clearly targeting civilian areas, not military targets, and pretty widespread in different regions of the country. So yes, it is a pretty stark contrast. The sense that I got just being here and being in the middle of it is that perhaps Iran is firing everything they've got, just firing what they have as they have it. I can tell you the drone, what we were told over here was Israeli time was going to be sometime between maybe 1:30 and 2:30. And normally if there's something coming in, you hear a siren. The siren sounds basically like, for our listeners from the Midwest, it sounds like a tornado siren. There's no way you can miss it. And the drones, I think, didn't even get close because we didn't hear anything. But there were absolutely multiple waves of missiles. I can confirm people I was with saw them. We could hear them, and they were certainly not headed toward military targets.
Well, reportedly, the U.S. is now moving a couple of destroyers to the eastern Mediterranean. Does this indicate, at least from your perspective, that the U.S. could potentially become more involved in this war?
I think there was a very clear statement from the United States earlier, and sometimes you have to carefully parse this. So the statement that we heard, I think it was from President Trump, and I apologize, it might have been Secretary of State Rubio, not sure which, but they said the United States will not be involved in Israel's offensive operations. Now, if you know anything about the military side, you'll notice a huge gap there, and the gap is it says offensive, doesn't say anything about defensive. And so the United States, and I think we're going to see, if people remember the coalition that stopped Iran from hitting Israel in the past when Iran struck the first time, I think you're going to see a similar coalition, perhaps. Maybe some different actors. It's hard to say, but I do think the U.S. is going to be involved for sure in stopping any Iranian retaliation. I think also there's a signaling fact. President Trump has made it very clear in his statements to Iran, you need to negotiate or else. And I think President Trump is certainly wanting to add more leverage as well. So
yep, absolutely.
That's where we are right now.
Yeah, let me come back to that in just a moment. But with all of this, I think certainly the U.S. would get involved if any U.S. bases or troops or whatever are targeted. Obviously, that would change things. But what do you think? I'd love your opinion on whether or not this is an open door for Israel to attack Iran's oil assets. Is that becoming a likelihood as Iran continues to retaliate?
Yeah, I think that's up to Iran. Are they going to escalate? Are they going to continue with the barrages? Eventually, Israel's going to run out of nuclear sites to hit. And so at a certain point, I think President Trump was very clear that Iran needs to make a choice.
Yep.
And I think we'll know that very soon, because if Iran continues to fire as they did tonight, these barrages at Israel, I think the Israelis are going to continue to respond. And what we've seen thus far in every exchange between Israel and Iran since October 7th directly is that Israel is a lot more effective than Iran. Obviously, it's a little disconcerting being on the ground, but if you look at it just from a purely pragmatic perspective, Israel is doing a much better job of intercepting anything coming from Iran than Iran is, and Israel strikes have been a lot more effective.
So going back to what you mentioned a while ago, as far as the really choice being in Iran's corner right now, it appears as though reports are at least coming out that they have or going to back out of the negotiations that were scheduled for this weekend. What do you think of that? Are the talks dead, or do you think there's any chance that they could still resume?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think for Iran to pull out would be a mistake, because basically President Trump coming up with some sort of deal is probably the only chance they have of getting Israel to stop. I mean, some of the messaging that we're hearing from the Israeli government is that this is just the beginning from their perspective. And today was a very heavy first day, but they're not telling people they're not saying this is going to be over tomorrow or this is going to be quick. They're saying, they will go on as long as it takes. And they're saying this is just the beginning. So I think if Iran wants to stop the pain on them, I think they almost certainly will need to do some sort of off-ramp. And the only way they're getting that is probably talks with President Trump.
Wow. So we've only got a couple of seconds here, but any chance you think Iran does back down?
I think it's unlikely. Ideologically, I think they're so locked in for just this fight with Israel. In the same way that Israel's been preparing militarily, I think Iran may continue to escalate, but we'll see what happens in the next 48 hours.
Dr. A.J. Nolte, Director of the Institute of Israel Studies, Regent University. Stay safe. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.